Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Embellish Podcast, an opportunity for me to ramble about whiskey or something for a few minutes. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, then send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today we have a fantastic conversation with Seth from Broken Barrel Whiskey Company, so I hope you enjoy. All right, this afternoon I have Seth from Broken Barrel Whiskey Company joining me, also Infused Spirits and probably about 3 or 4 other projects that you've got going on at any given time. I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, and then we'll walk through a handful of questions. Be aware of your time and make sure that you've got other things that you got to take care of, but kind of explain to us who you are and what it is that you do.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on. My name is Seth Benhaim. I am the founder and the now chief creative officer of Broken Barrel Whiskey and the Infused Spirits Group. We are a portfolio of single bottle infused vodkas, as well as the Broken Barrel Whiskey brand, which is a finished whiskey line using multiple cask stave finishes in tandem in a process we have trademarked and called the oak bill, that sits just under the mash bill on every one of our bottles. You can read and see the various different ratio of oak staves used against one another to finish and add those extra notes and characteristics and flavors to the various whiskeys we use or are putting out. So you've got bourbon, rye, we've done American whiskey, we've done wheat whiskey, we've done single malt whiskey, we've done corn whiskey, we've blended whiskey, we've sourced from Indiana, multiple different distilleries in Kentucky, but predominantly from Owensboro for the core lineup. And then we also have sourced from a small distillery in Los Angeles, which is where I am right now, in our sort of secondary / headquarter office, where it is pretty much an office, but it has a tasting room, a bar, a little couple lounge areas to sit in, and it has about 50 barrels in the back, aging and sweating in the California heat. So it's a cool spot, and that's what's going on. So
Yep.
Anyway, thanks for having me. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm always excited to talk to different and unique brands with what they're doing, and I think you're talking about, I think you guys call it the infusery there in California.
It started as the infusery,
Okay.
and then we've since kind of reskinned the whole thing during COVID to be Broken Barrel's headquarter office. So the sign outside, the listing on Google, it's all Broken Barrel now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you type in the infusery, it'll still pop up on Google Maps or whatever. And then, we've been calling it the Stave House. I don't know if that's sticking or not, and we haven't put any money behind it. So Broken Barrel Stave House, the infusery, they're all fine. Again, it's not like a highly advertised or marketed venue, but we are open every day from 9 to 5 while we're here doing our call it day job. People can walk in, have a tasting, get a flight, buy a bottle. We have a gift shop. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to hang out. If you like whiskey and you're in Southern California, I highly, highly recommend. I don't want to spoil any surprises, but there's a lot of fun stuff to do here, including breaking a barrel. And there's more, but I'll leave that for maybe later in the podcast or at the end or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's the reason why I guess maybe I came across the name infusery, is I was actually looking at it on a map, because I was mapping the distance between you, and there's a guy I went to high school with that has a cider company that's about 25 minutes from you. And he was a year or two younger than me, and he's been out there for quite a while. He had spent some time in Wall Street, and then opened up a cider company. And I'm like, hey, I've been trying to get out of to the left coast and see what I could find out there and kind of explore. And I'm like, hey, maybe I could hit both of these things up at the same time. And so I came across the infusery on Google
You are
Maps.
welcome. You are welcome anytime. And if you come, we will roll out the red carpet for you, man.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna start with you use Green River, which is in Owensboro, and
Yep.
I greatly appreciate that because that's a number one, it's a fantastic distillery, but number two, it's a part of Western Kentucky, and most of the folks that do whiskey think Western Kentucky sort of stops way before you get to Owensboro. I say that because I am another 2 hours west of Owensboro in the state of Kentucky, right? So I am
So you're
here.
like you're
Yeah, I'm in the boot of Kentucky, but it's
where
been
are you exactly?
so Murray. It's
Murray.
a small town. We've got a university here, and that's about it. But like the bottom of Kentucky where it has that little like boot, that bottom
Hmm.
right piece. That's
Yep.
us. That is exactly where I am. Um, but I think that you mentioned in there that your title has slightly changed, right?
It
Is
has.
it, and that's a recent thing. Before I think you guys have picked up a CEO slash leader of the company at this point, based off
Yeah.
of just the growth of it. Was that a part of your
Yeah.
plan, or is that like just a necessary evil?
Oh, well, certainly not an evil. It is the opposite of evil. It is
Right.
extremely positive, and we are extremely fortunate to have the experience, talent, and leadership of someone as seasoned and as an industry veteran, I should say, join our company. And we're all only as good as the people we work with, and so a lot of smart people will always say or point to, oh, hire people smarter than you. It's like, all right, well, there's a lot of things I'm good at, and a lot of things that I could be better at or learn more about. And while I started this company, I am and will always be the founder. My name is on the bottle.
Hmm.
Everything you have or will taste from this company, as long as I'm call it alive and not not here. It's coming from me. So I mean, that's kind of the gist of it. And so I felt like a creative officer role was probably more apropos to what it is I'm doing, because I had another daughter in March. My wife and I welcomed our second daughter, Zoe, into the world, and so that was felt like the right time to bring in some extra help, because I, of course, wanted to be home and be with my newborn and be with my wife and help out. And just, with two kids, it's a lot different than having one kid. And so the timing just kind of worked out perfectly because he was available. So we brought in Simon Birch, who is the former CEO of Green River. And obviously, when they were acquired by Bardstown, you don't need two CEOs. So they figured out that situation, and Simon was available. And he, of course, as he likes to say, he liked our business so much as the supplier for us that he actually, he loved it so much he wanted to be involved. So he not only invested in the
Hmm.
business with his own personal money, but also then wanted to help me and help the team by bringing his expertise to the business, which is kind of a whole business conversation alone that would probably take up all the time. But that's the long short of it. He's here now.
Hmm.
He's been here since April 2023. We are rapidly expanding our distribution. We are tightening up our distribution channels. We are working on a slew of new campaigns. I'm doing a lot more marketing than I had done in the past, just sheer availability of time. We're relaunching our website. We've hired social media folks to help us. We've got expanded PR. I'm out more, going to be out more, especially back half of this year, just visiting markets, doing events, doing tastings, doing sales meetings, just all hands on deck, and a lot more creative stuff. We're looking 3 years out, what products we're going to be releasing, creating our new schedule for collaborations. There's just a lot of shit going on. So,
Yeah. I mean, and it definitely sounds like that, and maybe necessary evil is more of a turn of phrase than it is like I think it's an evil thing. I mean, it's interesting. Usually, you bring in a CEO type person, and you've got to pay them money to come, and I assume he is taking a salary, but at this point, like he paid money to join you, right? Like that's
other way
incredibly
around.
encouraging to bring somebody in that way, and you guys took a really early chance on Green River, right? Before Green River was Green River,
They weren't great. They were Terra Essential. When we met them, sorry, I've been working with them before Simon was. Simon
Yep.
joined, I believe, in 2018. He was there for 4 years
Hmm.
as their CEO. They hired him on. I don't remember who the CEO was before him, but we were working with OZ Tyler, and when we went out to meet with them, it was Jacob Call, kind of like
Hmm.
giving me the tour and showing me around, and that was the it was the different company at the time. It was before they were called Green, way before they were called Green River.
So how did you even like? So you're a brand. You're an infused spirits. You're a vodka brand, but you're looking to get into whiskey and you're buying stuff. And I know you picked up some barrels from different companies to kind of begin the brand effectively. But then you're like, all right, we need a sustained source of alcohol. How do you find this distillery in Western Kentucky?
We go to a lot of trade shows, and most people may not realize that Green River, obviously, they have their own brand now, but before
Hmm.
that, and they had an OZ Tyler brand. I actually have a bottle of OZ Tyler somewhere on my, over there,
Hmm.
somewhere on that wall,
Yeah.
under all those bottles. Um, yeah. So the sorry, the question was sorry, I lost
How,
my
how,
train of thought.
how did you find them? And you started with you
How did I
found out
find?
you went to
So
trade
yeah, we
shows and
went to a
whatnot.
trade show, and a lot of people don't recognize or realize that their entire business model was bulk sales. So make a lot of whiskey, sell the barrels, sell private label. So a lot of those brands you've never heard of before that are sitting on a Total Wine shelf that are only at Total Wine because the brand is owned by Total Wine, like Winchester Bourbon or Quarter Horse or some of these brands. Those are
Hmm.
made at places like Green River slash OZ Tyler, and they are that's the model. Like that's where they were making, I think, most, if not nearly close to all their revenue was in bulk sales, right? And then they have private clients like Broken Barrel who weren't buying necessarily barrels, that they were actually bottling there and getting exactly what they needed and having their materials, their labels, their corks, their capsules all sent to Green River slash Josie Tyler to be produced. And so we were originally a bulk client, and then we became, I guess, what you'd call a private client once we started making everything in house there in 2020. So that's kind of how that relationship unfolded. And we
Yeah,
met
and
at a trade show. They were like selling bulk, and they're like, "We're a
mhm.
bulk supplier. We can sell you barrels." And we're like, "All right, well, let's try your stuff." And we tried it. And we're like, "Oh shit, that's pretty good actually." And at the time, it was like 9 months old. The whiskey was young.
Right.
We met them when their oldest whiskey was 6 months old.
It's got to be somewhat like eh, you've got to feel some degree of pride and like you pick them out and then we fast forward to in the last year and somebody like Bardstown Bourbon Company shows up and says, hey, we're willing to pay millions upon millions of dollars for this brand. Like, is that like a little bit of a trip for you guys? You're like, hey, we knew ahead of time.
I get that feeling about a lot of things.
Well, I mean, considering what you do, I think you probably should.
I don't think I
But
have a crystal ball, but I definitely have, on a number of occasions, looked at the person, whoever I'm sitting with, going, "This is going to be worth money," or "This is going to be acquired," or "This is going to
uh,
be the next big thing," blah blah blah. So yeah, it happens all the time.
so you did your undergrad work in retail and consumer science,
Yeah. Ooh,
and
how'd
then
you know that?
huh? I mean, like I dig around on things.
There you go.
Arizona State University. You
Yeah,
did the fraternity
University of
thing.
Arizona. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, University of Arizona. Um, different school, but
Mortal enemies, those two. Sun
right,
Devil.
yeah. No, I mean, if we're talking sports, then I made a terrible, terrible snafu. Did you like when you finished college? Did you know like you eventually wanted to be an entrepreneur? Do you come from a family of entrepreneurs, or
No,
did they just sort
no,
of
I don't.
happen?
No, I did not come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad is the chief of hand surgery at UCLA. He is a doctor. The exact opposite. I can barely even look at, like, he'll show me pictures of some of the shit, and I'm just like, dude,
No,
I can't.
no, that's
I'm
not
gonna
okay.
throw up if I look at this. Is like this is the antithesis of what I want to be doing. Is looking at these pictures of whatever the fuck you're showing me. And my mom was a teacher, so
Mhm.
both of them were, very academic.
Mhm.
They both do not drink. They don't know a ton about business. Not to say they're extremely smart and can
Right.
converse about it, but no, I went in a very, 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 very different direction than both my parents and my brother and everyone in my family. So
Mhm.
no, this is just kind of the way I am and the world I fell into. And, I'm very, very passionate. If this room is not evidence of what I'm into, it's spirits, spirits, and spirits. Like I'm
Right.
into hard alcohol, and I am very much in my comfort zone and dealing with and talking about and doing business in this world. This is because I love business. I love numbers. I'm very mathematically charged in terms of the way I think. Everything's numbers and dollars and blah blah blah. But I'm also very we food, wine, even beer, whiskey, fine spirits. Like I'm very much into all that. Those are my interests. Those are the things I want to talk about and uh, communalize over. Is these the finer things in life is enjoyment. I love
Mhm.
travel, so travel plays a big part. Finding different casks, working with different distilleries. I've been to over 200 distilleries now in the last 11 years. So it's it's just been a labor of love, and I'm very passionate about it all, and it's been absolutely a blast. So I'm very, very fortunate to get to do what I do and come to this space and work with the people I work with every day. So that's a blessing, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah. Um, and it seems like, at least I've had this conversation with a number of people that are, maybe mathematically or scientifically minded, but also have like an appreciation for art or whatever. That spirit seems to be a place where those two things can kind of converge, because
Mm-hmm.
there is a science, there is a math of it, but then there's
Absolutely.
also this like nebulous portion that's like human connection and flavor profiles and artistry and
Yep.
whatever else. Like, you think about the guys at Barrel Whiskey in Lexington. The guy that started that was like a data scientist before,
Oh
and
yeah,
then he
and
comes
or
to
the guy who
this, right?
started. Speak of Lexington, speak of science. Like the guys who did Pierce Lyons in London, who also own um, Town Branch. That's what it's
Yep.
called. And they have the brewery, Lexington Brewery. Like they're they made their money in yeast.
Mm-hmm.
Like they genetically did a strain of yeast that they sold a shit ton of, and like, oh wait, we can make alcohol with this yeast, and they're a chemical science based background. So it's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. I love those stories, and having been to both their facility in Ireland as well as the distillery in Lexington, I love that stuff. Now I'm not nearly as scientifically oriented as most people that would hold positions like mine. A lot of these folks are distillers or
Mm-hmm.
have some kind of a science background or formal training in blending. And personally, I'm just figuring it out as I go along. Like, oh, let's do this and this and see how it tastes. And oh, this works, this doesn't work. Thank God I have a decent palate. And if I
Mm-hmm.
think something's good, I'm not too far off. Having this kind of a library of competitors and placeholders to kind of benchmark what we're doing against. Is this new batch of small batch as good as our last batch, or as good as Michter's, Jim Beam, Jefferson, whatever? Like I own those products, so I can go taste them against what I'm doing. um, I try to think like a consumer because I am a consumer. Like, is this a good value or a good spot for a product at this price point? And then the business mind kicks in and it goes from there. But yeah, no, I mean, I wish I knew a little bit more about the science of it all than I
Mm-hmm.
do, but that doesn't mean I'm not capable of taking whiskey from barrel A and whiskey from barrel B, or whiskey type A and whiskey type B, and combining them in a plethora of different combinations to find the right blend and the right finish and the right oak bill and all those things. So
Yeah.
definitely uh, a little bit of science in my world, but not as
Mhm.
much as obviously distilleries who distill their own product and are converting grain to alcohol and the whole process that goes along with it in distillation. So
Yeah, and I think and I think it's one of the things that you do. And if I look around the room behind you, you have to drink different things so you don't end up with like tunnel vision with this very very granular view of what flavor profiles are going to be. And so you have to drink other spirits, you have to drink wine, beer, you have to drink and eat all the things, so you can kind of understand what's going to happen next. And I guess I'm sort of curious. You've before we started recording, I was talking about I've got the Cask of Amontillado, I've got a Mizunara finish that you did. Um, how do you go about finding a new barrel type that you think you want to use? Is this like, a barrel broker calls you up and says, "Hey, I have these things," or you just like you drink
that
something, you're like, "I have an idea now."
there's a combination. There's the things I want to do that I seek out, and then there are the things I'm offered and go, oh, you know what? And I'm always weary nowadays, even more than before. I am weary of what I'm being offered because if I'm getting the email, all my
So is
competitors are
everybody
getting the
else,
email.
right?
So all those amber, like it goes,
Amburana.
that goes two ways. That goes for liquid,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes for barrels. And so I got an email. Good example. I got an email like, oh, I have 12-year-old Barton bourbon for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh man, shit, that's a good look right there. I might have to get into some of that, 12-year-old Barton bourbon. And I didn't pull the trigger for whatever reason at the time. And boom, you see all these Kentucky
Right.
12, Kentucky, and then the next year 13, next year 14, next year 15, whether they had released it all or they had finished it or blended it or just bottled it. And I'm like, oh, I know what that is. That's that Barton I was offered in 2019.
Right.
Here it is now, 2022, as a 15-year. Very, 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 very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, like, oh, Amber, I get an Amberana email every week. It's like, dude, I don't want any more Amber. I did one Amberana one time. It was 15% of Ann Oakville against Armagnac and
Mm-hmm.
uh, other woods in that Oakville, maybe French oak, I think. And it's cool. We tried it. I got it in. I originally was going to do a 30% Amberana Oakville for this group, and I was like, no. I took one whiff of it, and I actually put a little bit into the drum because it was a single barrel, and it was. I tasted it after 2 days. And I'm going to pull this out. Like this is too strong. I don't like this flavor. I don't like the way it's tasting. This
Mm-hmm.
obsession with Amberana is. It's almost like Mizunara 2 years ago, but it's funny because I did Mizunara 4 years ago,
Right.
and even then I thought I was like, all right, and hopefully this isn't too on the nose. But I try. So to answer your question, I try to work within the context of what whiskeys will blend well together to give me a unique base that no one else has,
Mm-hmm.
like our Americana, which is a good example in our core lineup. Or I'm trying to find unique blends of barrels that I have not seen anyone do before. And there's so many more barrel finish combinations coming out, like Penelope or Barrel Craft Spirits. Some of those guys who are doing the same thing in the sense that they're using multiple different barrels in tandem with one another. And some of them have been great. Oh my God, there's some great products from those brands, and some of them have
Mm-hmm.
been, ooh, not so great. And I wasn't a fan. And I'm sure people have the same opinion of our stuff. But I think where we differ is that because we use staves, we get the outside or the exterior of the barrel, and there's always an interesting thought component that we have to factor in. Where are these barrels stored? How old are these barrels? How long was the uh, contents within that barrel in that barrel? Is this a 20-year-old sherry versus
Mm-hmm.
a 2-year-old bourbon barrel versus a brand new French oak, and all the thought components like, do we want to do new barrels with really old barrels and combine that? And then you get into the types of what those barrels. And then, yeah, I mean, we're doing a coffee liqueur barrel finish, which I don't think has ever been done. I've never seen anyone else do it, but I said, oh, I love coffee spirits. I love coffee liqueur. I fucking love coffee liqueur. Like
Yeah, I've seen a coffee
I'm
liqueur do a whiskey finish, right, where they put coffee liqueur
the other
in a
way,
rye barrel.
other way, other way. So I take the barrel after the coffee liqueur was in it. So
So
I'm
this is
adding
already on the market, or this has already been out?
coming. We're starting
Okay.
the oak bill today actually.
Okay,
Uh,
because I was gonna say, like, I feel like I would have noticed that
fall,
because I have a significant love of coffee, and I'm like, all right, I missed this one. There's a handful
No,
that you
it's
guys put
coming
out that I
out.
missed.
We're
Okay,
working
perfect.
with Laurel Canyon Spirits, which is a company here in California, and they do all their stuff up in San Jose. So our first collaboration was with LA. Our next one's going to be with NorCal, and we're going to slowly make our way out. We actually have a collaboration with Mexico, with a Mexican winery that'll be really neat. And so we've got a lot of fun stuff in the works surrounding all that. So anyway, that's the process is don't do what everyone else is doing. If they're zig, we're zag. Like we just have to be different. And I mean, you'll see us go in some crazy directions like coffee liqueur, but you will not see us do like the vanilla extract barrels or the Tabasco barrels. This bullshit that you see on these lists. And the watermelon brandy, like there is no watermelon brandy, like it doesn't exist
Yeah, you're talking
really.
about meme whiskey, is what you're talking about. Like it's
The
just
meme
meme
whiskey,
whiskey.
yeah, there's like these whiskeys that come out that are, well, the reality is the content of the barrels that are being claimed as finishing, those barrels probably had said content in it for days, weeks, a month. It's not a
Hmm.
real, there wasn't an actual intention of aging for a year or so, which also means there's a kind of lighter interaction or lesser interaction between the content, spirit or liquor or whatever, with the oak. It hasn't soaked in. Like when you get a red wine barrel that the red wine's been in there for 3 or 4 years, you can see the bleed line
Hmm.
of the soak line of the red hue of wine and how deep into the density of the stave that wine barrel. And we know this because we open the barrels up, like we break
Right.
the barrels. So we see the cross section of every stave. So we can see how much uh, depth that the content has soaked into. Traditional barrel finishes don't get to see that because they don't open the barrel up. They keep it intact, they keep it whole, they keep it sturdy. We don't do that. We break the shit open. So anyway,
Yeah. Well,
that's
and
that's
I,
kind
I
of
think
where
I
that's
think it
part of it.
at least for me, the thing that makes it maybe a little bit more honest is, there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily governed, and barrel finishing is sort of one of those things. You guys are busting the barrel up, but everybody else is doing barrel finishing. They could be using wet barrels, and what defines a wet barrel? Like, does a wet barrel still have a gallon of product inside of it, and do you dump that gallon out or do you leave it in? Like, how are you actually dealing with this? You can't do that because you've broken your barrel apart, right? Like, it is no longer capable of holding any whisk or anything at that point
We're not.
before
We're
you bring
definitely
it
not
in.
blending. Yeah, we're definitely not going to get like a glass worth of the prior content. It would spill out onto the
Right.
onto the floor where we're breaking the barrel, or the mat, or the tarp, or whatever. So no, we don't get the prior. It is truly an oak finish with oak bill. The oak is the only thing going into the whiskey. There's no extra flavors or liquids
Hmm.
added or any shit like that. Like that would be, you can't, I mean, technically, if there's a wine barrel finish and there's still wine in the barrel, you are now blending wine with whiskey, and especially with bourbon, which is even more
No added
tightly
flavors.
restricted. You can't do that. That is
Right.
against the law. That is against the. I mean, no one's gonna go in and check this and like
Hmm.
reverse engineer the spirit or the end product to say, oh well, we actually found literally grape DNA in this liquid. It's not a real thing.
Right.
So yeah, but a
But
wet
there's also
barrel,
nothing that prevents them from putting, a cup full of the liquid in there, spinning the barrel around, bringing the bung down, draining it out, and there's still stuff coating the inside of the barrel because this is a thing that some people within whiskey have been concerned that is happening with barrel finishes. It's like, it's still in there. They coat the barrel, they dump it out, and it's now empty, but there's still
I think
some inside, right? Just like
you
anything.
can decipher that
Right.
by looking at the type of barrel finish and then stepping back and asking yourself a simple question of what company makes a barrel aged watermelon brandy that puts out like a 2 year old or a 1 year old or a 5 year old watermelon brandy? They don't. And the
Mm-hmm.
reality is that while there might be a watermelon flavored brandy, or in the very, very unlikely and or not accurately stated watermelon brandy, could there be a watermelon distilled from, or sorry, brandy distilled from watermelon,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't think is happening either. Uh, the reality is you have a barrel, ex-bourbon barrel, that is 1 to whatever bottles of watermelon flavored extracts plus brandy put in there. And, at that point, it's basically flavoring the whiskey. Whereas I think,
Yep.
like even our coffee liqueur find, that is a 6 month age product. I
Mm-hmm.
met the owner. I talked to him. I invited him here. He sat in my office and drank with me. Like it's a cool. When
Right.
we get ready to bottle that thing, we're gonna go up to San Jose and go visit the distillery where it was produced and barrel aged. There's a level of uh, involvement that we want to have, especially as we get to our higher end products, where we go out there and really make the effort to get to understand. Like I worked intricately with Los Angeles Distillery when we did our Los Angeles Distillery collaboration and did the barrel pick with the buyer and the whole deal. And beyond that, I went down and twice to Ensenada in Baja California, in Mexico, to source the wine barrels that we're using for our Mexican red wine finish. So there's a lot of that going on. We're really trying to get our hands as dirty as possible with the
Yeah.
partners and the barrels and the sources of whiskey that we are working with uh, to be different and a cut above.
Yeah, and one of the I think one of the things that I think you can be credited with is a high degree of authenticity in what you're doing, because you are being as transparent as you possibly can be. We know where the whiskey's coming from. We know what you're putting in it to try to add these stave finishes, barrel finishes, whatever you want to call it. And maybe you've answered this one before, but I don't know that it's necessarily been asked. You guys are pretty keen on you break the barrel apart and then you introduce the barrel to the whiskey in its completeness. And for any barrel, the exterior of the barrel has rarely had interaction with a whiskey, right? It rarely, maybe it's come all the way out through the wood or maybe not. Do you think, and this is maybe a really subjective question, do you think that maybe the thing that makes it unique, what you guys are doing, is that you're getting some degree of whatever was in the barrel, but also some degree of similar to a Scotch influence because it's unfinished oak that hasn't been charred, hasn't been done whatever, that the outside is adding that influence. Does that question make
Um,
sense?
I don't. Yes and no. I think part of what you're saying is there in that yes, the exterior of the barrel is adding a whole, complete, unique other layer and definition to the construct of the whiskey it's in contact with. But I wouldn't say it's anything like Scotch. Like Scotch
Mm-hmm.
whiskey, while it does go into a used barrel predominantly, most Scotch will end up in an ex-bourbon barrel, or some of them are full maturation in sherry cask, or they go into, I don't know, some other kind of barrel. Uh, Typically used barrel. I mean, they'll call it out if it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Bourbon, they don't call it out because it has to be
Right.
a new charred oak barrel. But a brand like, let's say, Auchentoshan will do a virgin oak, and they'll call out virgin oak because it is not normal or
Mm-hmm.
assumed or by law that Scotch had to go into a new charred oak barrel. And again, obviously, the color difference, you can get a 10, 20, 30-year-old Scotch that is lighter in color after that much time in a barrel than a 3-year-old bourbon let's say from Texas, like a Garrison or something that,
Mm-hmm.
or that has really deep, rich color because it went into a new charred oak barrel and is a bourbon. And that, people misunderstand, like, oh, why is Scotch so light and blah blah. It doesn't mean it's not good. Doesn't mean it's not wildly flavorful. It just, you cannot um, discount the amount of color and impact that new charred oak has, which is why I like bourbon. But I also do like some of these whiskeys that we've been using that are American whiskeys, because we're an American whiskey company. We only use American whiskey. And I have been able to find, and actually am seeking out constantly, American whiskey that went into a used barrel off the still. And
Mm-hmm.
why I do that is because it doesn't have it, a lot of characteristics and flavor and construct of that whiskey is being built by the expansion and contraction and the chemistry of being in a barrel, but it's not picking up all those really bold, powerful flavors that come from the bourbon style of whiskey, which is the new
Mm-hmm.
charred oak, or American rye whiskey, new charred oak. And those used barrel American whiskeys, they're great because they have great viscosity, great body. They're such a full, like, thickened whiskey that has really done its time, but it's missing the flavor. And what do? We add flavor. Broken
Mm-hmm.
Barrel adds flavor from this stave and that cask and blah blah blah. So I a whiskey with little or no flavor doesn't bother me. A whiskey that's thin and young and doesn't taste good, that bothers me because I can't fix time.
Right.
Right? Time is not something you can cheat or skirt or go around. And I'm not in, we don't do rapid aging. When we are doing the oak bill, and applying that process, we are trying to layer in complexity and flavor and depth to the whiskey that might not be there. But if we have a great base, a good, solid, sturdy base that can stand on its own and has notable attributes, but is also impressionable and will accept. This is why we won't do a 15-year bourbon that's been 15 years in new charred oak. I don't think a sherry cask or a wine cask or whatever is going to be as notable or as
Mm-hmm.
important, or even, you make the argument, why would you fuck with a 15-year-old bourbon to begin with? But
Right.
I don't mind bucking with these 2, 3, 4-year-old bourbons because they've got the components of those early years of the bourbon barrel, but they're still impressionable at that age to sherry cask and rum cask, and you could peach brandy cask or whatever, and you can get that flavor in there, just enough to really enhance and embolden those bourbons. But I have no issue taking a 10-year American whiskey that spent its entirety in a used cask and then throwing sherry at that, because that's going to taste great. That's going to be lively and vivacious and so much better than maybe we ever could have thought or anticipated. So that's the kind of stuff I'm after, truly.
And maybe it's good to find out, for a guy who has a whiskey named Heresy, you do have a line. Like, don't fuck with 15-year bourbon, right? So for a person who has no problem being heretical, there's still a line to be drawn there. And I would challenge, hey,
Yeah,
if you give
sure.
it a shot and see what
Sure.
happens with 15-year whiskey.
I mean, I would do it if money were no object. I would do it.
Right.
I mean, I would.
There's a cost factor that then makes it
Yeah.
prohibitive to do much with it, because you have this risk of you make it worse, and then you've got to figure out how to sell 15-year whiskey that you've made worse. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I
so
don't think I would make it worse, but I would probably want the quality and prestige of the barrels used to finish a 15-year bourbon to be good or great, and they would probably cost a fortune, as well as the whiskey would cost a fortune. And if it was not out of this world, I'd feel really guilty about trying to sell this very expensive product that may not actually be that much better than a 3 year
What was
this
already
or a
there.
5 year that, you
Right.
know?
So I was listening to an interview you did with Drew Hanish, and you mentioned that you can tweak the recipe as you go along, right? Like as you kind of throw oak in and say, okay, it's not quite there. I mean, it would be tough to do that with a 15-year whiskey, but it kind of in that vein. So a handful of years ago, my wife and her grandfather decided they wanted to make wine, and neither one of them had ever made wine before. And so as they're making it, they keep adding before they've actually put it in to ferment, they keep adding sugar because it doesn't taste right. And so what they come out the other end with is pretty terrible because they just added way too much sugar. Have you done that? Like, have you tried to tweak anything and you come out the other side and you're like, this is just not going to work? Like, what do you do with that?
You put it back in the barrel and you wait and see what
You just
happens.
see what
I've got a
happens?
barrel. I've got a barrel in the back that I tasted it and I go, I don't know if this is gonna be anything. And so we just put it back in the barrel and we'll check on it in a few years. So there's no embarrassment or
Mm,
the one thing you can't do is we can't, I don't know about other people, we can't put it out. We can't put it out if it doesn't
mm,
taste good. If I don't give a sign off, it's not going out, right? It's not We're not going to sacrifice the quality or the reputation we're building to make a couple bucks. That's
mm,
not going to happen. So we're not out there to go, okay, this is acceptable, but not great. We're not going to put that product out. And to that point, some of our whiskeys I think have been better than others, but it's also personal preference. I've had people tell me that they loved XYZ whiskey we made, and we made so many in the last
mm,
couple of years. And it becomes this really fun conversation I love having about, well, I like the honey smoke. Well, no, I like the Fenwalker. I can't even, and other people go, I can't even drink the Fenwalker. And then I'm sitting there like, I actually kind of like the Fenwalker. I think it's pretty damn good. That's why I put it out. But I also drink peated scotch. And a lot of
mm,
these, bourbon or American whiskey junkies don't like or understand or get or have a palate for peated anything. And so it becomes this discourse that I kind of like stirring that pot and getting people to
mm,
go, oh, well, they did this thing and this wasn't my speed and I didn't like it. But then they did that other thing and that's my favorite whiskey and whatever. So it's fun. I love because I'm like you pointed out earlier, I am a kind of a student of all the spirits and I'm buying various different casks to combine with various different types of whiskey. And I have some rules. I won't put peated barrels with any corn whiskey whatsoever. I think that is sacrilegious to the
mm,
point that, like, not heresy sacrilegious, like, oh, Seth's going to do it. It's more like
mm,
nobody who has taste buds should do this because it's bad. We do things because it's different, not because it's bad. No,
mm,
not to be like, counterculture. So I'm not a fan of like tequila cast finished bourbons. I think that anyone who's truly spent time drinking lots of tequila and lots of bourbon can probably tell you that, like, all right, let's not blend up milk and orange juice either. That's not going to taste good. Or mint and orange. Don't Those flavors do not go together. They are very bad. Chocolate and pickle, probably a bad combo. Let's not go there. And similarly,
there may be somebody that likes that, but that's going to be a really, really small
oh, there's
group of
always
people,
going to be someone who's like, oh, I love chocolate pickles. That's my favorite food. Like, okay, you do you, man. Like,
Right, but that's not
fun.
enough to sell. Like you can't sell that. That
Yeah.
doesn't
So
work.
I go, I have to kind of use a little bit of the business brain on some of these things and go, is this going to sell? Like, there is an
Mm,
element of, okay, it's unique. Okay, it's different. Okay, it's cool. Okay, it tastes really good. But then there's always, always, always the thought, is it going to sell? And that's got to
mhm.
be a factor. So,
Right. I mean, it's not UNICEF. You're trying to make kind of make some money while doing something enjoyable. And you brought up peat, and so I'm gonna jump into this one because I thought of it. You've done peat before, right? You did
3 times. Yep.
3 times. Now, what were the three offerings that you did?
One led to the other, and that led to the other, and so forth. But we did the Isle of Peat, and I grossly overordered. My mathematics were wrong, and I had substantial amount more barrels than I intended to have for the product line because we were trying to do we had a limited bottle run, and the labels were actually bottle numbered.
Mhm.
1 of 1,000, 2 of 1,000, 3 of 1,000. They're sequential. So we got to the last bottle and the last label, and we stopped and we looked at the tank, and we still had a ton of whiskey left. So we did the Isle of Peat, which was finished with 15-year-old Lafroig barrels, which was really cool, actually. We can't say, or we couldn't market that it was Lafroig barrels, but I have a picture. They were Lafroig barrels.
Right.
And we had 4
Well,
Lafroig
you're not
barrels.
marketing it anymore because it's all gone, right? You
It's all
can't market
gone.
what's already sold.
Sold. Yeah, I got double gold at San Francisco World Spirits, which was great. They understood. They're a bunch of well-rounded, worldly whiskey drinkers that drink everything from everywhere all the time. So they got it. They understood it. They understood the assignment. They drank it. They tasted it. They said it was good. And a lot of American whiskey fans tried it and go, "What the fuck is this? Like, this is smoky, but it's." And then a lot
I
of
mean, it
Scotch
says
fans
it in the
tried it.
name. It says on the label very clearly Isle of Peat.
Yeah, and then a lot of people who were Scotch heads were like, "This is not peaty at all," which it wasn't
Right.
peated. It was with peat barrels.
Barrels.
They weren't mega fans of it, but then most people would have stopped there. I didn't. I was like, you know what, fuck that, I'm gonna do it again. So I then took that extra liquid we had and put it into Oloroso sherry and Ardbeg barrels. I doubled down on peat and added sherry, and I came out with the Fenwalker. And now the whiskey was a little older because it's been a year in those barrels. And that one was a really small run. It was like 900 bottles, so it didn't light the world on fire. It kind of came and went, and it was the last thing we produced before the packaging change and the real kind of transition into what is now Broken Barrel. So I think a lot of people got really excited about the new bottles. They kind of didn't really care or do or say much about the Fenwalker. And then I did the Fenwalker 2, the second sighting, which brought it all back. And it all spent another year in Ardbeg barrels, Ardbeg 10. And that's been sitting there. That came out last year, and that sold really fast. I had no problem selling that. But it wasn't a huge conversation for anyone in particular. It kind of was under the radar. It was only in California. It wasn't online. So that kind of was a sale for us that went out really fast. We didn't have the PR machine kind of running on that product. But I have one last barrel that will be the third and final Fenwalker, the Fenwalker third encounter. And at this point, there's no pressure to release it. So it is just aging. It's been there since December of last year. And I believe it's 5 years old now. But I don't know. When I go and I pull from the barrel once every 6 months. So we'll see. We'll see where it's at in 6 months. And, one day I hope I open it up and I feel like it's ready and it's done its thing. It's gaining ABV here in Southern California right now. It's not too humid here. It's pretty dry. It's pretty hot right now. So it's actually gaining a little ABV. I'm just looking forward to seeing what happens with it. There's no pressure to launch anything anytime soon.
So is that going to be your last foray into peat, or have you considered doing like partnering with anybody that does North American peated whiskey and getting their barrels?
There are some really good American peated whiskeys that I've tried. Actually, two of my favorites are Stark Distillery out of Pasadena. He imports peated Scotch malt, and 10th Street in NorCal, both in California, oddly, does a peated whiskey. And then there's a Delbach in Tucson, Arizona, does a mesquite
Mesquite,
smoke.
yeah.
It's not peat, but it's mesquite
It
smoke.
you get a smoke flavor, and it's like
It's
traditional
there.
bourbon fans are gonna not see the difference between the two, really.
Yeah, if you don't like peat, you won't like the Delbach mesquite smoke, cast strength, or whatever. But those are all really good smoky American whiskeys that I like. And I would endorse those 100%. Those are great whiskeys. I own all of those. Big fan. But yeah. But yeah, no, I think to your question, though, the last Fenwalker, it may be the last peat you see from me for a while.
Mm-hmm. Is that going to be a California only, or are you going to try to push that through?
It might be online only. I may just do
Yeah.
that for fans and people that go to our site and buy direct.
Well, I'm marking it down right now. I'm marking it
Yeah,
down. That's what
if you
Seth
like
said
peat,
today.
yeah, but I couldn't tell you if it's coming out next year or in 5 years. I
Five
couldn't
years.
tell you that.
I mean, look, man, I'm one of those people that will stick with something for a long time and just kind of keep checking. I've done that with a number of things.
We're that kind
And
of company. We're the kind of company where if you keep checking back in with us, there will be a lot of crazy, cool surprise shit that comes out that'll just be worth kind of like, oh, we're not running the same plays again and again and again, and we're not releasing, God bless them, and I'm a customer, so but High West isn't launching like a new annual release every year. It's just
yep.
midwinters, batch 5, batch 6, batch 7,
Mm-hmm.
batch 8 of the same label. Where that's not what we're doing. We're not launching the same label again and again every year. Like, we will come out with brand new, one of a kind, never before seen, never will make again labels every year. That is what
Mm-hmm.
you can expect from us.
So what you're saying is you should really like to submit to TTB and get denied, and submit to TTB and get denied, and then finally get the label just right for them. Like you just like this almost Sisyphus-like
A
activity.
sucker for
Yeah.
pain, and somewhat of a masochist. No, we're actually really good. We got our shit through the TTB on the first or second try.
Nice, nice.
We understand the game.
Yeah. And you sort of alluded to this about, everybody has something, has a kind of a different flavor and that they enjoy, right? And I was able to be a part of the virtual tasting that you did with the Bourbon Lens tasting group, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months ago or whatever. And we walked
Cool.
through a
Very
series of different things. And it's always really nice to hear other people talk about what they like. And even if I don't like it, I know it's good for someone else. And there are very few bad whiskeys I've ever had. I've just had whiskeys that I don't care for. There are some bad ones out there, but most of the time it's just like, this is not a flavor that's for me, but it's really good for somebody else. Somebody likes black licorice. They're going to find some flavor profiles out there that they enjoy that I particularly don't care for. But you guys, at least one of the things that you've said in a number of interviews, and I really like this, is that you try to make some sessionable brands of whiskeys, right? Things that you can just sit down and you can drink, and have a good time. And it's evident, with the bourbon offerings, and then when you get into the Americana, it's a little bit different, and the heresy is fantastic. At least in my impression of it, it was one of the things that sort of caught me off guard whenever we did that tasting was the heresy specifically. But one of the last things that I want to ask you, and I'm hoping it's not me that just froze. Maybe it is. So you've mentioned this on several interviews that whenever you were in college, you were really into like making cocktails for people and sort of putting things together. And at least with the the 95 proof whiskey, it tastes like something that would go really, really well in a cocktail. And so my question is, like, what's the summertime cocktail that I should make with this 95 proof whiskey that is a summer whiskey cocktail?
Ooh, like a whiskey sour would be like the the easy one. I think that's a go-to. Whiskey sours are awesome. They're refreshing. They're bright. I think it's a drink you can have two or three of easily. More than an old fashioned or a Manhattan or something. Those kind of really can start to, or you could do a smash with it. You could do a really cool bourbon smash. So you can do a couple blackberries, some sugar, a little lemon juice, and smash that up, like muddle it up, and then even add mint if you're feeling bold. Get a julep kind of vibe going. Mint julep was good too. Those are great.
I think you got me on that last one. I think we've got some blackberries growing out in our backyard
Yeah,
right now, so I
the
may
blackberry. Yeah, smash
I may
up
walk outside and
blackberries,
get some
mint.
blackberries and some mint and some lemon and make a whiskey smash out of it. Now, stepping completely outside of whiskey, what's the other summertime cocktail that's not whiskey related? Like what's that thing? What should we be drinking?
I'm in California, so we just drink margaritas all the time.
Margaritas, but they've got to be made fresh. Or
Yeah.
are you using pre-made premixes?
Oh, I'm not making them. I have people make them for me, man.
I like
I know myself well enough to know I suck at making cocktails.
all
I
right.
work hard for my money. I work hard for my money, so I got to spend it. And I like supporting places too. Like I like going
Mhm.
to local restaurants, not chains. And I
Yep.
like getting cocktails at like, privately owned bars and restaurants and supporting my community and like neighborhoods and, you know, places where you can see the family owns the restaurant. That's the kind of stuff that I love. So,
The only thing I have left is, I know some of the answer of this, and where are we going to be able to see you this fall? I think I know that you're going to be in the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. I'll be at the Kentucky Bourbon
Bourbon
Festival. I
Festival,
expect to wave at you and say
Bourbon on the
hi. But where else are we going to see you?
Bourbon Festival, Bourbon on the Banks. There'll be some LA Magazine events in Southern California that I will be at. There's a chance I'm going to Alaska to be at Brown Jug, which is a chain out there. That's what I have for you now. I don't know my own. I don't know where I'm going to be next week,
Right.
so it's kind of hard.
I think the big one is Kentucky Bourbon Festival, Bourbon on
Yeah,
the
I will be there.
Banks. For this end of the country, like this is the opportune moment to be able to see Seth, to be able to kind of figure out what's going on with Broken Barrel at that point in time.
Yep.
I appreciate the time you've given me. I know you said 30 minutes and we're at 58.
Yeah, I know. I got to jump.
Apologize for that. But if you got anything else, feel free to drop it. If not, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, John. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing the edited, cleaned up version of this where I don't lose my picture on my camera and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in for this offering from the Embellish podcast. If you enjoyed this, please leave a review on whatever platform that you have to be consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media at Twitter or Instagram using EmbellishPod and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can also be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. Thanks for stopping by.